At 87 years old, Bill Anderson, better known to the world as Whisperin' Bill, finds himself at a place in life where triumph and tragedy exist side by side. Once celebrated for his gentle, hushed delivery that redefined the sound of country music, Bill now faces the heartbreaking weight of time itself. His career spans over 6 decades. He stood on the same Opry stage as legends, and his songs gave voice to some of the greatest moments in country music history. Yet, as the years stretch on, Anderson has had to endure the unbearable, outliving nearly all of his closest friends and collaborators, battling the harsh realities of aging and facing the quiet loneliness that fame cannot shield a man from. Behind the twang of his timeless voice lies a man who has seen glory, but who also carries pain that no amount of applause can erase. What happened to Whisperin' Bill? And why are things so tragic for him now at 87? Bill Anderson's story begins far from the glitter of the Grand Ole Opry stage. Born James William Anderson III in Columbia, South Carolina, and raised in Decatur, Georgia, he was not immediately destined for stardom. As a young man, Bill's dream wasn't to sing. It was to write. While many country artists of his generation pursued the spotlight, Bill understood something deeper, that the heart of country music lies in its stories. With a pen in hand and a quiet determination, he began crafting songs that spoke to the struggles, joys, and heartbreaks of everyday people. By his early 20s, Bill's songwriting talent was undeniable. His breakthrough came when Ray Price recorded City Lights in 1958, a song Bill had written while working as a young DJ in Georgia. That song not only reached #1 on the country charts, it also introduced Bill to the wider Nashville scene as a songwriter to watch. From there, doors opened quickly, and soon Anderson was not just writing hits, he was singing them too. His soft, whisper-like vocal style was unlike anything audiences had heard. While others belted their way to the top, Bill's hushed tone drew listeners in closer, making them feel like he was singing directly to them. It was this unique quality that earned him the enduring nickname Whisperin' Bill, a moniker that stuck for the rest of his life. By the 1960s, Anderson had become one of country's biggest stars. Hits like Still, Po Folks, and Mama Sang a Song defined his career and cemented him as both a performer and a storyteller. His words resonated across generations, touching soldiers, farmers, families, and dreamers alike. His presence on stage wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, it was subtle, commanding attention through sincerity rather than spectacle. But as his star rose, so too did the pressures of fame. Behind the curtain of success was a man trying to navigate marriages, fatherhood, and the relentless demands of Nashville's music industry. The world knew him as Whisperin' Bill, the gentle giant of country music. But privately, Bill was already learning that even the brightest careers cast long shadows. This rise to glory set the stage for both his legendary career and the tragedies that would one day define his later years. For most country artists, standing on the Grand Ole Opry stage is a dream that only comes once. For Bill Anderson, it became a second home. Inducted as a member in 1961, he would go on to become one of the longest-serving Opry performers in history, his presence there spanning more than 6 decades. Week after week, Bill's gentle voice echoed through the Ryman Auditorium and later the Opry House, reminding audiences that country music didn't always need to shout to be heard. His songs of faith, heartbreak, and simple living resonated deeply with fans who filled the pews. Whisperin' Bill became not just a performer at the Opry, he became a symbol of its very spirit. Throughout the years, he shared the stage with giants of the genre. Patsy Cline once sang his words, Conway Twitty cracked jokes with him backstage, and Loretta Lynn embraced him as a dear friend. Bill's career allowed him to live through the golden age of the Opry, a time when the institution wasn't just about music, but about community. Artists supported one another, bonded over the struggles of touring, and leaned on each other when the road became too long. For Bill, the Opry wasn't simply a gig, it was family. But as the years passed, that family began to thin. One by one, The voices that had surrounded him grew silent. He watched as his fellow legends left the stage forever, each departure leaving an empty chair in the circle. The Opry, once a vibrant gathering place of friends and collaborators, began to feel quieter, lonelier. Even as younger stars rose to carry the tradition forward, Bill could not escape the ache of absence. The audience still cheered, the lights still shone, but backstage, the laughter of old friends was gone. For a man whose career had been built on connection and community, the losses struck deep. To walk onto that sacred stage now, at 87 years old, is both an honor and a heartbreak. Bill still whispers into the microphone, still gives the crowd everything he has, but he also carries the ghosts of those who once stood beside him. And as the Opry changes with the times, embracing modern acts and new styles, Bill faces the tragic reality that the world he helped build has all but disappeared, leaving him a survivor in a place that often feels more like a museum of memories than a living, breathing family. Behind the glow of the stage lights and the applause of millions lies a man who has carried his share of heartbreak. For Bill Anderson, the tragedies of his personal life often stood in stark contrast to the success of his public career. While fans saw the smiling performer with a soft-spoken voice and a gift for songwriting, Bill's private world was far more complicated. His first marriage, to his college sweetheart Bette, was marked by the strains that fame and constant touring placed on family life. Together they had children, but the demands of the road, the pressures of the industry, and the unavoidable temptations of stardom created cracks that could not be mended. Divorce followed, and with it, the pain of watching a family fracture under the weight of circumstances he could not control. His second marriage also ended in heartbreak, leaving Bill to wrestle with the ache of love lost more than once. The man who had written countless songs about heartbreak suddenly found himself living inside the lyrics he had once crafted for others. But perhaps the deepest tragedies were not in failed marriages, but in the unbearable losses of loved ones, friends who had once been part of his closest circle, songwriters, bandmates, fellow Opry stars were suddenly gone, some taken by illness, others by the cruel passage of time. Each loss left Bill standing a little more alone, and though he continued to write songs of resilience, inside he carried the sorrow of outliving nearly everyone who had shared his golden years. At times, he confessed that it felt like a curse to survive when so many others had gone before him. Even in moments of triumph, like receiving induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001, there was always a shadow, a reminder of who wasn't there to celebrate with him. And as the years pressed on, the tragedies did not stop. Bill faced health scares within his own family, heartbreak that no stage could soothe, and a loneliness that followed him even as audiences continued to cheer. Whisperin' Bill became known for his ability to make people feel less alone through his songs, but in his own life, the silence after the music ended often became unbearable. Fame could bring him recognition, but it could never bring back what he had lost. For all the accolades and applause, the battles Bill Anderson fights today are not ones the public can easily see. At 87 years old, life itself becomes a daily test of endurance. While Whisperin' Bill still graces the stage, his body no longer moves with the same ease it once did. Years of touring, sleepless nights on the road, and the natural toll of age have left him physically frailer, forcing him to slow down, even as his heart still longs for the music. Health concerns, though seldom spoken about openly, have shadowed his later years. His once boundless energy now gives way to exhaustion. Where he once spent hours meeting fans, shaking hands, and signing autographs, now even simple appearances require careful planning and recovery time. Behind the gentle smile, Bill has carried the quiet frustration of knowing that the body can betray the spirit, no matter how determined the will remains. But perhaps the greatest silent battle has been the loneliness that comes with age. When the stage lights fade and the audience goes home, Bill often returns to an empty room, surrounded not by the laughter of friends and family, but by memories. The quiet can be deafening for a man who once lived in the constant company of fellow musicians, who thrived in the noise of Opry backstage halls, who drew inspiration from long nights of collaboration. The stillness of old age becomes a cruel reminder of what has been lost. Mental and emotional battles are perhaps even harder than the physical ones. Though he continues to write, the industry has shifted dramatically, and Bill sometimes feels like a stranger in the very world he helped build. Younger artists often pass by without recognizing the depth of his influence, and modern audiences can sometimes overlook the pioneers who paved the way. For a man who dedicated his life to storytelling, the fear of being forgotten weighs heavily. Yet Bill rarely speaks of these struggles publicly. He has always carried himself with quiet dignity, his whispering voice never one to shout for sympathy. Instead, he weaves his pain into his songs, choosing to transform private battles into words that others can lean on. But even music has its limits. As age advances and the circle of friends grows smaller, Bill Anderson continues to fight these silent wars with a bravery most will never see, leaving the world to wonder just how heavy the weight truly is that Whisperin' Bill carries in his twilight years. Perhaps the cruelest tragedy of Bill Anderson's later years is the endless list of names he has had to say goodbye to. For most of his life, the stage was filled with familiar voices: Loretta Lynn, Patsy Cline, Conway Twitty, George Jones, and so many others. They weren't just fellow performers. They were companions who shared the same struggles, the same long nights on the road, the same laughter in the wings of the Opry. For Bill, those friendships formed the backbone of his career. Yet as the decades passed, one by one, those voices went silent. George Jones, his old friend and collaborator, passed away in 2013. Loretta Lynn, who had been part of the same Opry family for so many years, died in 2022. Conway Twitty was gone even earlier, taken suddenly in the 1990s, and Patsy Cline, who had once recorded Bill's songs, had her life cut short in that infamous plane crash in 1963. Each loss was not just the passing of a legend, it was the loss of a piece of Bill's own life story. Every funeral, every obituary, left Bill standing a little more alone on the stage that had once been so crowded. In interviews, he has spoken candidly about the strange and painful experience of outliving nearly all of his peers. There's a loneliness that lingers when a man realizes he has become one of the last torchbearers of a bygone era. The Opry stage that once rang with familiar laughter now often feels like a museum of ghosts, and Bill, though honored as a living legend, is also burdened with survivor's grief. Even his songwriting partners, those who knew him best in the quiet of a writing room, are mostly gone. Whisperin' Bill, who spent his life telling other people's stories, now carries the heavy responsibility of remembering the stories of his friends. He often shares memories of them, keeping their legacies alive through anecdotes and tributes. But each story comes with a cost. It means revisiting the pain of their absence, again and again. At 87, Bill is surrounded by younger performers who respect him deeply, but respect cannot replace the camaraderie of equals. He can pass along advice, share wisdom, and smile for photographs. But when the curtain falls, he knows the truth. The people who once stood shoulder to shoulder with him are no longer there. Losing friends and peers is not simply a fact of age. It is a weight that grows heavier with every passing year. And though Bill faces it with dignity, it remains one of the most tragic realities of his twilight years. For all his success, Bill Anderson's later years have not been free from financial strain and professional challenges. To the outside world, he is a country music hall of famer, a Grand Ole Opry icon, and one of the most recorded songwriters of all time. But behind the curtain, the music business has never been kind to its legends. In the early days of Nashville, publishing rights and royalties often slipped through the hands of the very artists who created the hits. Bill, like so many of his peers, sometimes found himself with a fraction of the wealth that his songs generated for others, even as artists such as Connie Smith, George Strait, and Kenny Chesney turned his words into gold records. The rewards for Bill were not always proportional. The music industry changed faster than anyone could have predicted. In the streaming era, the value of songwriting diminished, with pennies replacing the once reliable flow of royalties. For a man whose career was built on the pen, this shift was more than frustrating. It was devastating. Anderson continued to write, collaborate, and release new music, but the checks arriving in the mail looked nothing like the glory days. Touring was once a way to balance the scales, but age inevitably made the road harder to bear. Whisperin' Bill was never one for elaborate shows or stadium tours, but even small appearances became a challenge. Travel costs climbed. While ticket sales for older acts sometimes lagged behind the younger stars, Nashville pushed to the front of the line. For an artist used to constant motion, slowing down meant more than just missing the stage. It meant feeling the financial pinch that comes when the spotlight begins to fade. There have also been reports and whispers of Anderson selling parts of his song catalog to manage expenses, a move many older songwriters have made in recent years. While such deals bring short-term relief, they also strip away pieces of the legacy he spent his life building. And with each song sold, the sense of permanence, the idea that he would always have something to pass down, grows weaker. Beyond money, the struggle to remain relevant in an industry obsessed with youth has weighed on Bill's spirit. Country radio no longer plays his songs. Awards shows rarely mention his name, and the genre he helped shape has drifted into pop country territory far from his storytelling roots. Younger generations know him, if at all, as a name in the liner notes rather than a living legend. It is a cruel irony that one of the most influential figures in country music now wrestles with the fear of being forgotten. For Whisperin' Bill, the financial strains are real, but the career struggles cut even deeper. To have given so much of his life to the music and still face uncertainty in old age is one of the most tragic chapters of his story. For a man who has devoted nearly 7 decades to country music, Bill Anderson's greatest fear is not simply growing old, it is being forgotten. In Nashville, where trends change overnight and yesterday's legends are too often replaced by tomorrow's stars, legacy can feel fragile, even for someone of Whisperin' Bill's stature. He has written more than 40 top 10 hits, collaborated with giants of the industry, and stood in the Opry circle longer than nearly anyone else. And yet, as country music has shifted toward a pop-driven sound, his contributions risk being seen as distant relics rather than living influences. Bill himself has admitted that the recognition he receives now often comes not from new fans, but from historians, industry insiders, and older generations who remember his songs from the radio. Younger audiences, raised on streaming playlists and crossover hits, may not realize that many of their favorite stars built their success on the foundation that Anderson and his peers laid down decades earlier. For Bill, this lack of awareness stings deeply. The thought that his music, the very thing that gave him purpose, identity, and connection, might one day fade into obscurity, haunts him more than financial worries or fading health ever could. He has tried to fight against that erasure. In recent years, Bill has collaborated with modern acts, penning songs with artists like Brad Paisley and Jamie Johnson, trying to bridge the gap between generations. These collaborations brought him brief moments of renewed recognition, proving that his pen was still as sharp as ever. Yet even these successes were fleeting, often overshadowed by the relentless wave of new releases. His induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001 was a monumental achievement, one that should have cemented his name for all time. But even within those sacred halls, the spotlight inevitably drifts to newer inductees, and Bill remains a quiet figure in the background, his achievements sometimes overshadowed by louder personalities. Perhaps what makes this fear so tragic is that Bill's life has always been about remembering others. He has kept alive the memories of his friends, his peers, and his songwriting partners through stories, tributes, and performances. He has never stopped honoring the people who built country music alongside him. And yet, in his quiet moments, he wonders who will do the same for him when he is gone. Will the next generation of artists know that the man who whispered his way into country history gave them the very soil their careers were planted in? At 87, Bill Anderson continues to write, continues to whisper, but his voice grows fainter against the noise of modern country. And the tragedy lies not in his fading strength, but in the possibility that one day the world may forget to listen. At 87 years old, Bill Anderson stands as both a legend and a survivor, caught in the fragile space between glory and sorrow. His life has been one of remarkable triumphs, hit songs that defined generations, Opry appearances that shaped the very heart of country music, and a songwriting catalog that will forever be studied by those who truly understand the power of words. And yet, beneath that legacy, the truth is tragic. Bill has outlived nearly everyone who once stood beside him, walked through failed marriages and heartbreak that scarred him more deeply than most will ever know, and faced an industry that often forgets its elders, even while building on their foundations. For Whisperin' Bill, the applause has never been enough to drown out the silence he feels when the curtain falls. There is a cruel paradox in being celebrated as an icon, while privately carrying the loneliness of age. When he steps on stage at the Opry, the audience still rises to their feet, honoring him as one of the last living links to a golden era of country music. But when the lights go down, the room grows quiet, and Bill is left with the memories of those who are no longer there to share the moment with him. The tragedy of his later years is not simply the physical frailty that comes with aging. It is the emptiness that lingers when a man has given so much of his life to the world and wonders if the world will remember him when he is gone. Bill's fears are not unique, but they are magnified by his position. He is not just another aging man. He is Whisperin' Bill, a name synonymous with country storytelling. He knows that history can be both a blessing and a curse, that even legends can be reduced to footnotes if the next generation fails to carry their names forward. That fear weighs heavily on him now. Perhaps more than any health concern, more than any financial struggle, it is the fear of silence. Not the kind that follows a whispered lyric, but the kind that erases a voice from memory altogether. And yet, even in the shadow of tragedy, there remains something unshakable about Bill Anderson. He still writes, still performs, and still offers his voice, fragile though it may be, to anyone willing to listen. He has not stopped creating, not stopped whispering truths into melodies. There is dignity in that, a quiet defiance against the erasure he so deeply fears. In his twilight years, Bill embodies the very essence of country music itself: resilience, born of heartbreak, beauty shaped from sorrow, and hope carved out of loss. Perhaps that is his greatest gift to the world, that even in tragedy, he reminds us of the power of endurance, of holding on, of whispering into the darkness, and trusting that someone, somewhere, is still listening. For all that he has lost, Bill Anderson remains a beacon of what it means to live for music, to sacrifice everything for art, and to carry on even when the weight of time feels unbearable. His story is tragic, yes, but it is also deeply human. And as long as there are those who remember, as long as someone presses play on one of his old records, or hums the lyrics to Still, Whisperin' Bill's voice will never truly fade. At 87, his whisper may be softer, but it still echoes through the halls of the Opry, through the heart of Nashville, and through the souls of those who understand that legends are never really gone. They only grow quieter with time.